So, the movie begins in Live Spring Church during a sharing session where depressed people share their emotional burden. Renfield gives us his backstory on how he got acquainted with Dracula, back when he was a real estate lawyer. He went to Dracula, who introduced him to the high lavish life and in the end made him his familiar. This means that Renfield was to be in service of Dracula, forever. Renfield was granted power by Dracula, but it comes from consuming bugs as his came from consuming blood. One day, hunters come and ambush Dracula. They engage in a fight with him and finally capture him. Dracula manipulates Renfield into setting him free and...
Oh, damn!
One of the hunters opens up the curtain and Dracula is burnt by the sunlight. Terribly. Cut to the present day, turns out that the only thing depressing this lady so much is the music listened to by some guy called Mitch. Geez. Renfield is here on another mission though. He's here to find victims that he's gonna feed to Dracula since he's tasked with taking care of him cause he got injured and stuff. Cut to some warehouse, Renfield goes for one of his victims. The lot thought that Renfield was a hitman because they had stolen drugs from a thug family called the Lobos.
I'm something much worse. I'm a friend of Caitlin.
What?
You serious?
Who?
Renfield beats them up and put them to sleep using some chemical on a handkerchief. The real hitman finally arrives and gets into an altercation with Renfield. He manages to gut Renfield and pin him down, but, in the end he got his head punched clean off his shoulders. His head flew into the window of the car of the dude who hired him. After seeing this, the dude dipped. I mean, who wouldn't? The guy is held up in traffic and he is in a rush to get out of the area. He starts honking and gets the attention of Quincy, who has a personal grudge with his family since they are the ones who offed her dad. He tries to speed off, but his car tire is popped by a gunshot. He attempts to run on his feet but... and he gets arrested. Renfield takes his victims to Dracula for him to feed. He's still burnt by the way. He's not pleased with what Renfield had brought for him. He tells Renfield that he wants happy couples, unsuspecting tourists, a handful of nuns or a busload of cheerleaders to get to full power. Dracula heals Renfield using his blood and orders him to get him what he wants. At the police station, Teddy Lobo confesses on all the crime that they committed but is let go because... money. Quincy isn't happy about this, but the police chief doesn't listen to her and sets Teddy free. That's weirdly shady and suspicious. Quincy gets into some kind of argument about their dad with her sister. Teddy gets home and is sent to go and see his mom, who tells him to go and get their respect back by going after Quincy and eliminate her. Quincy and her partner go and conduct an investigation at the warehouse and finds a pen that leads them to the Mulat's restaurant. Teddy is there with his goons going after Quincy. Renfield is also there in search for more victims. Teddy confronts Quincy and points a gun at her. Renfield intervenes and they get into an altercation with Teddy and his goons and... After they were done handling the goons, Quincy thanked Renfield for saving her life and the people in the restaurant applaud him. Dracula calls on Renfield and shares with him his plan about world domination. Dracula looks a little healed up, I guess. Renfield goes to the sharing center seeking help. He is told that the relationship that he and Dracula have isn't good for him and he should cut him off and focus on himself. So he does. He gets a new apartment of his own. Renovates. Gives this kid an aunt? Learns how to comb his hair and file his fingernails? Went shopping? Just the regular stuff, you know. One day as Quincy was arguing with everyone at the police station, Renfield walks in looking all fresh and brought flowers for her. They sit and have a nice little chat. Back at the Lobos, they track down Renfield where they conclude that his last known location was at the old charity hospital. Wherever that is. Quincy goes to her sister with missing persons report of the guys that stole drugs from the Lobos. She asks her to run the evidence she provides her to prove whether the Lobos are responsible for their disappearance. Teddy Lobo and his goon crew go to the old charity hospital hoping to find Renfield. They get inside and find a pile of bodies. Teddy orders one of his men to call his mom, but Dracula began attacking Teddy's men, thereby leaving Teddy all by himself. As Teddy picked up the phone from the ground to talk to his mom, Dracula grabs him and lifts him by the neck. Dracula asks Teddy why he was there, and Teddy shows him pictures of Renfield. Dracula turns into bats and leaves. Renfield comes home to find Dracula in his apartment. He and Dracula get into an argument where in the middle of the argument Renfield takes out a book from the Live Spring Church, the sharing center.
What?
Dracula takes the book from him, sees the name behind it and leaves. Renfield realizes what has just happened and goes after him. Renfield reaches the sharing center and urges all his colleagues to leave, but they are confused by how Renfield is reacting and they stay put. Dracula gets there and the group leader invites him in. Big mistake. Dracula jokingly introduces himself to them. Renfield, knowing what is about to happen, pleads with Dracula to spare them since they are good people. Dracula massacres them in a matter of seconds. He then goes ahead and tells Renfield that he's gonna take over the world, and then he left. Quincy and her partner walk in the scene and apprehend Renfield. As they were about to leave with him, the whole precinct pulls up to the place together with the Lobos. It is about clear that they are all on a payroll from the Lobos. Mrs. Lobo and the police chief try to talk Quincy into getting into all those payroll shenanigans, but she creates distraction and escaped with Renfield. Dracula comes back to his lair and found Teddy still there. I mean, this dude had all the time in the world to escape when Dracula was away but chose to stay there waiting for death. What a dumbass. Teddy tells Dracula of his crime family and says that they can offer him anything he wants. They come to an agreement and...
Are you happy or are you gonna fuck me up?
Quincy wakes up in Renfield's apartment and found that he already tended to her wound. She tells him her tragic backstory and he tells her that he works for Dracula.
Who?
Dracula.
You serious?
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
Her sister calls her and tells her that she ran the evidence and found that the DNA is of a person whose murder charges go decades back. And that person is none other than Renfield. She plans to take Renfield to her sister. As Quincy and Renfield were about to leave, the police and the Lobo goons pull up, again. Renfield finds bugs, consumed them and got into whooping the police and the goons. Mrs. Lobo and the police chief were observing from the Lobo's place. Renfield rips off a guy's arms and used them as nunchucks and then as spears. I don't know how that works, but who cares? Then he took a guy's face off. Makes sense since the movie has Nicolas Cage in it.
Fatality.
The police chief says that he's done working for the Lobos, but as he was leaving, he gets decapitated by Teddy. Dracula is brought in a coffin to meet Mrs. Lobo and...
It's fucking Dracula!
Oh my God, who the hell cares?
He and Mrs. Lobo get acquainted. Quincy and Renfield are seated at some restaurant where Renfield tells Quincy about his past family and how he thought he would make their lives better when he was working for Dracula. Quincy calls her sister, but to her surprise the phone is picked up by Mrs. Lobo, who tells her that they have her sister. Dracula speaks to Renfield telepathically and tells him that he has found people that are gonna aid him in his cause. Quincy tells Renfield that the Lobos have her sister and she's gonna get her. Renfield tells her that the Lobos are working with Dracula and it's very dangerous. But she says that she's gonna get her with or without his help. She arms herself with guns and together, her and Renfield go to the Lobos. When they get there they find that Teddy and all the Lobo goons had been turned into familiars. Renfield and Quincy start fighting them. Renfield is out here bursting heads, literally. Quincy is saved by Renfield from being offed by Teddy and she goes to look for her sister. She finds Mrs. Lobo, who in turn dipped and Dracula came in. Teddy is pretty happy with his newfound superpowers, but Renfield tell him that they were a curse. Dracula asks Quincy to join him and he could bring her the justice she was denied and also save her sister. On the other hand, Teddy has the upper hand over Renfield and he begins to talk too much nonsense. As he was going in for Renfield, he got kicked in the abdomen so hard that he shit and puked blood and died instantly. When Renfield gets to Quincy, she acts as if she agreed with Dracula so as to get near the button that opens up the shades letting the sunlight in. Dracula begins to burn, he turned into bats and attacked Quincy and Renfield. He also knocked down Mrs. Lobo on the way. Renfield is knocked out unconscious. The lights begin to flicker and Dracula begins to tease Quincy. Dracula grabs Quincy and as he was going to feed on her, she shoots his leg and his blood heals Renfield. Renfield jumps on Dracula's back and
his name is John C.
Then broke his fangs. Other grow in their place. I wish I could do that. Renfield remembers the motivations from the sharing group and they give him the strength to whoop Dracula's butt. Dracula tosses Renfield away and tries to go for him but is trapped in a magic circle made out of cocaine? This scene is self-explanatory. In short, Dracula experienced hell while still on Earth. I mean, look at this. Look at the smiles. Jesus Christ. They end up chopping Dracula into pieces, mixed them with concrete and Mrs. Lobo is arrested and Quincy's sister is saved. Renfield harvests and uses Dracula's blood to bring back the depressed crew.
Don't come to my house or else I'll suck your dick. Blood. I'll suck your blood. Oh, shit.